Graham Healy, the Healy Report, and it's Sunday, the 18th of May 2025. Now, what this is, as I always say, it's going to be a short video, but sometimes they wind up being 30 minutes or whatever, but I'll try and keep this short this morning. Go onto my advocacy website, riseupaustraliabrisbane.com, and you'll see a couple of prophecies on the front page, and I'm just going to read out one key prophecy here for a start, just to keep everything in focus. Just one moment, please. Trump's 10-point plan. You'll notice on the front page, and I could, I'll put some links or images up so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But I've got Trump's 10-point plan to demolish the deep state as of the 5th of November. That was a video he put out just as he got elected, or I think, I think it was elected on the 5th. It was actually put out before then, but that 10-point plan he's implementing like you wouldn't believe. And the 2024 federal election will change Australia forever. I've written here, the Senate is the key. Unfortunately, the Senate is controlled by the demonic and the completely anti-Christ Greens, in every way, shape or form you can think of. They believe in the whole anti-Semitic sort of mentality. They believe in abortion. They believe in radical sex changes for children. All that stuff is what the Greens' policies are, and they're quite destructive, actually. Gone are the days where they were the tree huggers. Now they're the globalists, implementers. Now, the other thing is there's 10 key policies when Graham Healy runs for the Senate, 2025. Now, that didn't eventuate this election, but my prediction is Albo and them will go through a double dissolution within 6 months. And there's a prophecy here by John Valiski, he's a mate of mine, and I'll just bring that one up and read it out to you. And it was a word from John probably a few months ago, maybe 6 months ago. He says, "This is a word I received from my Heavenly Father for Graham Healy. Graham will be running for the Senate with confirmation early July, and my endorsement, Craig Kelly, will be the instigator." Now, that's interesting. Now, this was about 12 months ago, actually. Now, the thing is with the prophetic word, you can say, well, that's not happening right now. But I mean, I prophesied 3 or 4 years ago that Nigel Farage will be the future Prime Minister of the UK, and that's happening now. And at the time I was laughed at. I mean, I had to block a lot of people online because, all they're doing is looking at the nose, at the end of their face. They're not looking into the spirit. And a lot of these people, of course, if they're not spiritual, they don't see it. And even if they claim to be spiritual, they still don't see it, I find. Anyway, my endorsement, Craig Kelly, will be the instigator, ? I always saw Craig Kelly as the future Prime Minister of Australia, again, with a lot of flack, but I still see that anyhow. This will be a tight election, and at this prophetic word that John was speaking about, the 2025 election, about 12 months before it happened, 6 to 12 months before it happened, but I am going to put 10 strong men into the Senate. Obviously, it's not this Senate. Independents, all major parties will bow and comply to them to get any legislation through the Parliament. This will happen because my people prayed and the evil agenda will be removed. I am going to right this nation and reverse evil, and people will worship me again. I will establish security on the borders. Well, that's not happening at the moment. UN policies will be cut off. Not happening at the moment. The Reserve Bank will be pulled into line. Not happening at the moment. The law system toughened up. Definitely not happening at the moment. There will be celebrations by Christians. Australia will become the great south land of the Holy Spirit. Now, I don't want to turn this into a, the prophecy or religion or whatever, but the great south land of the Holy Spirit was a prophecy by Smith Wigglesworth, and he said basically that the great revival will start from New Zealand and Australia and go worldwide. Now, I believe that. The timing of that, I think, is fairly close. And with John's prophecy there, obviously it hasn't been the recent election, because none of that has come to pass. However, what I'm seeing in other very clued up political commentators such as Rowan Dean and Joel Jamal have seen that Labor will not last very long. They'll wind up imploding with the radical Greens controlling the Senate, which they do now, and then the prophecy that John said there about 10 strong men rising up. You can see basically as soon as this went completely communist, basically this election, then you see the splits in the Nationals, splits in the Liberals, everyone's vying for positions, wondering why the Liberals lost 40 seats. We all know why. They lost them because they didn't provide an opposition. So just like in the UK, where Nigel Farage has formed the Reform the UK party, and it's going gangbusters, the Conservative Party in the UK has actually become so close to Labor, it's just not funny. So they may as well merge and be one party, and that's fatal because they don't represent anyone actually. They just represent the globalist agenda, which is, climate agendas, net zero BS, and anything that actually doesn't make money that they endorse. It's just craziness, the LBG agendas, which is like, this minute part of the population. But the silent majority is in Australia and around the world saying, hang on, we never voted for that. Hang on, we don't believe in that. We just want to have lower taxes. We want to have our own sovereignty back so that we can do exactly what Donald Trump's achieving in the US, and boy, is he going gangbusters, especially with his latest trip to the Middle East. I mean, man, as the King of Saudi Arabia said, Trump is actually a global president. He's a global president. He's not just the president of the USA. He's the president of the world. They recognise it. Now, when the Arabs recognise it, that's saying something. And, Trump's the greatest president since Ronald Reagan, actually. And he's just kicking butt, and he's doing it super fast. And I love him. I've supported Trump from day one before he was president. I saw that he had the destiny, he had the mandate from God. And even a lot of Christians are against Trump. Can you believe it? Yet they're against the man who's, reinstating the Bible into schools in the US, who's deporting criminals, who's basically realigning with Israel. Some Christians are against him. Can you believe it? So all it says to me, any Christian that is against Donald Trump, obviously, I would question whether they're Christians or not, because there's something seriously wrong when you don't align with someone who's aligning with the policies of, Judeo-Christian policies. Now, back in Australia, there's no one aligning with Judeo-Christian policies. It's a complete disaster. It's a train wreck in Australia, but probably we expected that because Australia lags behind the rest of the world probably about 6 to 12 months. So what Trump's doing, is affecting Australian politics already. The ones who have been sitting back and waiting for something to happen, like I see Matt Canavan's like pushing the real Trump agenda pro, and good on you, Matt, but it's taken a long time for you to get the fire in the belly, hasn't it? And that's the same with a lot of the other politicians. Notwithstanding Jared Rennick, who is making a really great stand, and I believe that his party, the People First Army, I call it, and I renamed Senator Rennick, General Rennick, he'll form a third-party alternative, which I believe will control the Senate in the next election. Now, the next election is not going to be 3 years away. I say it'll be a double dissolution and a referendum on free speech coming up 6 months away. So I see that this year. So Albo will be out of control, and he won't be able to do anything because the radical Greens will try to control him in the Senate. Not just me saying that. It'll be a hung parliament basically pivoting on the radical Greens. And you think about it. The radical Greens stand for everything that every Australian, the majority of Australians, don't like. That's what the radical Greens stand for, including their support of Palestine. Can you believe it? Supporting terrorism. That's what they do, you know. And if any of the Greens went over and lived, and I've been to the election booths and seen people who represent the Greens. They're all the ones with the painted faces and rings in the noses and all this, and just. God bless them, I suppose, but they're certainly not the representation of the majority of Australians who are just trying to work for a quid and keep their families, with a roof over their house and with a roof over their heads and all that sort of stuff. Send any of the Greens over to the Middle East and see how their little policies pan out over there. They wouldn't last 10 minutes. They'd be on the head chopping block, literally. So, there's a certain reality check with all these so-called extremist parties, or what I call the woke. But without doubt, woke is out. Have a look what's happening in Ireland with Conor McGregor. Talk about a patriot. And I think he'll become president of Ireland. I believe he will. I'm just watching what he's doing. And I like it, actually. He's a total patriot, and he's got no fear because he's been that world champion UFC fighter, he's got a lot of respect from that in Ireland. And I'm half Irish. I know what the Irish are like. They're fighters, mate. They're not cowards. So the Irish blood is up in UK, and thank God for that, because they've been trying to do the same woke policies in Ireland as they're doing in the UK, and the UK system is just about a breaking point. In Australia, with the Labor and Greens in control now, you've got an open border policy. They don't screen people who come in, believe it. I'll tell you, I've got contacts who know that. So they're importing seeded terrorism. I'm not saying everyone's a terrorist, but there'll be, maybe 5% that are, or maybe 10% of those people they're bringing from the Middle East that'll be seeded with terrorism. And that's all you need to create problems. And look at the problems that have been created in Australia with the anti-Semitic stuff and all that's going on at the moment. So look, I'll leave that there. Don't want this video to go on too long. So that was the prophecy from John Belinsky, and I believe that'll come to pass. Now I'll just read out. Where are we here? Prophecy from Graham Healy. 10-point plan, federal election will change the Senate. The 10 key policies when Graham Healy runs for the Senate, and I've got May 2025, obviously that didn't work out, but quite possibly when they call the double dissolution, I'll consider running for the Senate there, and probably more than likely with my good friend Dr. William Bay. Now, the 10-point policy, which I'll have on this video so you can read it, I'll just read it. It's not going to change. This is what I'm about. If I run for the Senate, this is what I'll do. Number one, I'll align the federal government policies with Judeo-Christian values and basic common sense with family values. In other words, cancel the woke agenda. And I'll align with anyone who's doing that. Two, rebuild the Australian economy to be a sovereign nation, rather than influenced by third world unelected parties from overseas, i.e., the WHO and the Paris agreements and all that other, basically third party control from non-elected bureaucrats. Now, where are we? To rebuild Australia's economy to be sovereign rather than influenced by third-party unelected parties from overseas, as I explained. Implement and support 100% the financial blueprint for Australia by Senator Gerard Rennick. This includes an Australian national bank. Now, I've spoken about that before. We used to have our own bank, print our own money based on our own gold. We will do that. Senator Rennick has the plan, no problem there. Number 3, build the Bradford irrigation scheme within 5 years, which equals Australia to be the fruit bowl and the food supplier for Southeast Asia and beyond. So that Bradford irrigation scheme will go ahead, and it will turn the central part of Australia into basically the Garden of Eden. Then, mate, we'll have jobs all across Australia. We'll be a very wealthy nation. We will have the Australian golden era. Just as Trump's rebuilding the US, this is part of rebuilding the plan for Australia. Now, refer Bob Katter and Senator Malcolm Roberts on this. They have done a good job in highlighting the Bradford irrigation scheme, and I've got the connections there. Now, I see Clive Palmer underwriting this project as the ultimate infrastructure plan for the generation of wealth within Australia. Okay, that's point 3. Point 4, stop all subsidies for wind and solar and focus on oil and gas and thorium. You can read about thorium on my website. It's actually a lower grade than uranium, a lot cheaper. Australia's full of thorium, and even China is building thorium reactors. So that's something that we should look at very, very seriously, and it's a very viable proposition as an interim step to perhaps some longer term, uranium processing plants or uranium power plants and whatever. Refer Senator Malcolm Roberts and Rennick in the stop all subsidies. Also ethanol from sugarcane as an additive and natural source. Refer Bob Katter with this. This will restore the sugarcane industry in Queensland. Australia must have cheap base power and electricity, and we've got to just do something about it now. So I'm from a sugarcane growing family. My grandfather was one of the pioneers in the sugarcane industry in Innisfail at Meena Creek. Big history there. Read about that on my background and Rise Up Australia. You'll see a picture of my grandfather's farm there. I think they've turned it into cattle now, but I'd love to rebuy that area and turn it back into sugarcane. Number 5, re-abortion, which is the murdering of babies, basically. A total ban on abortion except in the medical situation where the mother's life is at risk, and diagnosed accordingly to the medical ethic of do no harm. That means do no harm to the mother, do no harm to the unborn baby, full stop, end of story. Now, the person who's leading the vanguard with that is Professor Joanne Howe, and she will lead this crusade. I've got a link to her website or her link there, and she's doing a tremendous job. She's a Catholic girl, Indian Catholic girl, Australian patriot, and she's rattling cages regarding anti-abortion, she's great. She'll head that little department. I'll do anything to facilitate her mission to stop, especially full-term babies being murdered, basically. There's no other word for it. Can't use the word terminated. That's murder when you kill a child that's actually breathing and living, and it's just there's no other word for it but murder. Okay, number 6, freedom of speech and peaceful religion, written into the Constitution. Now, it's not written in the Constitution, it's sort of assumed in the background, but we really don't have a freedom of speech Bill of Rights. And when I say peaceful religion, see, the thing is that you've got religions, and you know what I'm talking about, that aren't peaceful, and their objectives aren't peaceful. They want to take over the world by violence, and do a lot of head chopping in the process. So you've got to be very careful with who you endorse, especially into Australia. Trump's doing a good job rooting out that sort of terrorism environment in the US. He's sending them packing down to Guantanamo Bay, and the local ones can go to Alcatraz prison. Really good stuff he's doing over there. So the freedom of speech is critically important, and we have to have that a referendum over it, actually, and that's what I see. Now, 7, a royal commission into the COVID pandemic. Now, it was a pandemic. I've said several videos that have proved all us so-called conspiracy theorists were correct. Dr. Fauci is the most evil person on the planet. He should be in Guantanamo Bay. That's why he had to get all these pardons from sleepy Joe Biden. But the Royal Commission is the pandemic with full powers of criminal prosecution and full investigation into excess deaths and the mRNA injection. It's not a vaccine. It's an experimental injection. I'm not going to go into it on this website, but you know, people who've had 6 boosters are infected with a spike protein in every cell in the body, and they wonder why they've got thrombosis, wonder why they've got Guillain-Barré disease, they wonder why they've got myocarditis, wonder why they've got strokes and all this. Is because they've injected a DNA-altering experimental drug, basically, that's actually playing around with every cell in their body and manufacturing the pathogen of the coronavirus, which is a spike protein. And I might add that, Dr. Death, as I call him, Dr. Fauci, was totally involved with this in a it's actually a bioweapon experiment called gain of function in the Wuhan lab, and he was involved with that from day one. Obama banned gain of function. Fauci took it offshore to the Wuhan lab, then it escaped. He was responsible for the worldwide pandemic. It wasn't that coronavirus as such was actually more dangerous than a normal strength flu. You notice the flu disappeared over the pandemic? Doesn't take much to figure out, does it, folks? But certainly through their manipulation of the DNA of that particular virus was, in fact, more spreadable. Now, we go on to, we've got the Royal Commission. Now, with the Royal Commission, I've got Dr. William Bay and Nicola Provinsky, Australia's foremost vaccinologist. So, Dr. Bay actually is one that beat APRA in the Supreme Court of Australia in, it was towards the end of last year, 2024, 13th of December. And Nicola Provinsky is Australia's foremost vaccinologist, and he can really give you the background information on the mRNA injection. I've got a lot of information on riseupaustraliabrisbane.com, but that's point 7, the Royal Commission into the COVID pandemic. And it was a pandemic, it wasn't a pandemic, it was a pandemic with full powers of criminal prosecution. Now, number 8, align the federal government policies with President Trump and Robert Kennedy Jr., re-health and medical. Now, Robert Kennedy Jr. is now in charge of CDC and all those areas, and Australia has to follow suit because, we've really got to realign all that and get the bureaucrats out of the doctor-patient relationship, including security for the South Pacific nations by building a military alliance between USA and Australia. Some people say we've got that alliance, but we have to strengthen that alliance. That's point 8. Align the federal government policies with President Trump and Robert Kennedy Jr. and, for that matter, the medical stuff with Dr. Peter McCulloch. Now, number 9 is build a USA naval base at Darwin for strategic USA/Australia alliance for the protection of the South Pacific nations. So, I've done a link to Donald Trump's website there. So that particular alliance, or what I'm seeing is a Darwin Harbour turned into a massive repeat or it's like copy of the massive naval base Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. So Australia strategically needs to be the counter military station against the China expansion. So that is the obvious solution, and that is have a USA military base, basically a naval base with nuclear submarines sitting there in Darwin. Get rid of the Chinese there and get rid of the Chinese actually out of Australia's business altogether. We can deal with them independently, but they shouldn't be owning any property or leasing any of our ports. So number 10, we make Australia cash flow positive in 5 years with full employment, prosperity and zero unemployment, completely reverse the current trend. So we can make Australia cash flow positive within 5 years. To do that, we need Senator Jared Rennick. He's got the blueprint to do that, and I believe that we will achieve that with the next, I'll call a double dissolution / referendum coming up, and I believe in 6 months. So that's Graham Healy. That's the 10-point policy plan. If myself and Dr. Bay head towards the Senate, basically I'll be maybe second senator to Dr. Bay. I will. He's more of a vanguard person than me. I'm more of a backup person. So that's the plan. So go on to riseupaustraliabrisbane.com and have a look at the plan. And it's under, 10-point policies when Graham Healy runs for the Senate. Now, I'm just predicting that. When I actually do that, it'll depend on what happens in politics over the next 6 months. So that's Graham Healy over and out, the Healy Report, and we'll speak to you soon.